Jayaji, thank you very much for being here today and making it possible. We really look forward to your session today, and a number of them are looking forward to hearing from you in terms of what it really means by investing in yourself. And I'm really looking forward to, and I think all of us are looking forward to hearing from you. Nandji, thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for supporting the cause. I would like to also thank the entire temple board who's been behind this, helping promote this cause and also demonstrating interest in jointly driving this initiative. And we're hoping that along with the temple support, we'll do a lot more in the coming years. And we look forward to seeing you many more times. Thank you very much. I'll keep it short in the interest of time. I would like to invite Mr. Nandji and Jayaji onto the stage to say a few words and introduce Jayaji.
Thank you, Ramana. Today's lecture in investing yourself, I think will be very interesting for all of us. We all know about investing in the stock market, and we also know that the outcome is questionable always. Sometimes we get ahead, sometimes we get behind. And I'm pretty sure by investing yourself, Jayaji will agree that we always will get ahead. It's guaranteed. So we are all looking forward to this lecture today on investing yourself. Jayaji is a very powerful speaker, and she's the founder of Vedanta Vision and managing trustee of Vedanta Trust. Vedanta Vision is dedicated to the dissemination of Vedanta, Indian philosophy, which is the oldest management school in the world. And that's what we believe in. She has spent more than 40 years in the study and research of Vedanta, and has devoted herself her full time to the interpretation and representation of Vedanta for the modern generation. She has spoken at several prestigious organizations, few of them like World Economic Forums, World Bank, Southern California Edison in Los Angeles, and many others. This is quite long. She has also conducted many educational programs on basic human values for school children and the youth. I can keep on saying I have like few more pages, but I think it's more important that we give the podium to her and see how we can learn from her experience with the Vedanta. Thank you, Jayaji.
We'll begin with a short invocation. Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The topic for today is invest in yourself. Why are we speaking of investing in yourself? Because the truth is that every single human being is born, finite maybe, with faults and shortcomings, but is not designed to die like that. We are born finite to transform into the infinite. Just as a caterpillar is born only to transform into a butterfly and take to the skies, we are born to get to the infinite, to tap into our potential. And our potential is vast. It goes to the credit of our forefathers, the great Upanishadic masters, or even before that, who conceived of excellence, perfection, found their way there, and laid down pathways to get there, different pathways, because there are different types of people. And whichever pathway you follow, dedicatedly, you will get there. So, they say geniuses like Einstein tapped into barely 3% of their potential. Where does that leave the rest of us? 0.02%. So even as we are, we must have that vision of excellence, and we must drive ourselves to get there. And one of the most important things is to find the knowledge, find a teacher. And then there is a wonderful wisdom that emerges from that. As in the Kathopanishad, the young boy Nachiketas goes in quest of Lord Yama as a teacher. And the Upanishad says it was a wonderful combination of an Ascharya Vakta, an enlightened master, and Kushala Labdha, an eager student. And when that combination takes place, there's fire. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, a good student is like a dry matchstick. Slight touch is enough to ignite it. A bad student is like a moist matchstick. You keep rubbing, nothing happens. So, that vision you must have. Then you come to the world and the practical aspect of our life. You find that the world demands excellence from you every time. Gone are the days when you came out with sporadic acts of excellence, which would carry you through the rest of your career. Now, every time you act, you are expected to come up with excellence. Is that possible? Is the question. Take the example of sport. They find that they call it the zone. When a sports person is in the zone, which means completely focused and comes up with excellence, the opposition can't get him out. They have to just wait till he or she gets out of the zone and they can carry on with their game. Now, coaching masters, coaches and sports persons are baffled by this. Why is it that sometimes the sports person comes up with magnificent performance, and at other times, when perhaps he needs it badly, fails miserably? And they found that the difference is not in skills, not in fitness, but in the mind. they found that the best performance comes from a calm mind. When the mind of the sports person is calm, the thinking is clear, sharp, actions brilliant. When the mind is disturbed, the intellect is confused, actions flawed. Billie Jean King, when she was playing in the Wimbledon once, said she wanted to stop the game, grab the mic, and declare to all present that it's not about winning the match, it's not about getting the prize money, it's about what she called as pure action. This pure action she defines as effortlessness in the midst of intense exertion. I'm sure every one of us has experienced that. Think back to the moments of excellence that you came up with. And you will notice that these are the magical moments when you were so completely immersed in the action that your mind was calm, thinking was sharp. It's almost as if the actions unfurl in slow motion because your focus is so intense. And this is what the Gita speaks of. In the second chapter, Krishna defines yoga as yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is not exercises and breathing. It is union with the Lord. So he says yoga is perfection in action, dexterity of action, excellence in action. And then he follows it up by saying, Samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam, equanimity of mind, serenity of mind is yoga. So it's this wonderful combination of a calm mind and a sharp intellect that brings about brilliant actions. Now take a look at us. Whenever the mind is calm, there's a disinclination to activity, right? Like on a Sunday morning. You don't feel like acting, but the mind may be calm. And when you are geared up for activity like a Monday morning, you lose your peace of mind. You're stressed out. So these are the lower states. When the mind is calm and you're disinclined to activity, it is called the state of tamas, ignorance, lethargy. When you're bristling with activity but have an agitated, disturbed mind, it is called the state of rajas, passion, desire-driven activity. Alas, no one in the world knows sattva, where the mind is calm, because it's contemplative, it's focused on the higher. The intellect is sharp, and you come up with what we call as effortless excellence. So now, do you all agree that we are in varying degrees of agitated minds? What disturbs the mind? I'm not asking personal questions. Generally, around the world, you find two types of answers, two categories of answers that come up. The vast majority of people attribute their agitation to something, someone outside themselves. So you say, yes, I'm disturbed, but my mother-in-law is the cause of my agitation. Or my boss is the cause of the agitation. Or the cold weather is the cause of agitation. Like someone sent me a text message this morning or yesterday saying, can you believe it? It's still cold and raining in New York. So that, he believes, is the cause of his agitation. A minority, a few people, are convinced that their disturbance comes from within, but they don't know where it comes from, where within. Vedanta says emphatically that being human, we are designed in such a way that nothing in the world can disturb you except yourself. And you are doing a brilliant job of disturbing yourself. So where does this disturbance come from? Number one, petty preoccupations. If you look around you, you'll find people are obsessed with petty things. Like a few years ago when there was recession and people were badly hit, we were getting jobless here. There was a person who was interviewed on TV. I come here every year, so I happened to see that. And he said, the reason why we are not finding solutions to our problems is because everyone is focusing on unimportant things, like what Paris Hilton is doing, rather than the real problem. So it's petty preoccupations, negativity. From morning to night, start to finish, we are full of negative feelings towards others. And that saps you of energy and stresses you out. Third, unbridled desire. This unbridled desire puts you on a non-stop treadmill where you have to run faster and faster for joys that mean less and less. And so, you say you have no option because you don't consider the option of jumping off that treadmill and doing things for yourself. And the last, which is a killer, is ego. So let's take a look at how to make your mind calm. Motivation. Every morning you wake up and go out to work. What is it that motivates you in life? Is it deficiency? Are you deficit driven? Or do you operate from a sense of abundance? What I mean is, do you feel deprived or blessed? If you feel deprived, then you do the least possible because you want more. You're always focusing on something that you don't have. And you're driven by that. So one person says, or most of us say, I don't have enough money, so I need more money. I don't have a big enough home. I don't have a luxury car. I don't have, maybe a private yacht, a private jet. It never stops. It just goes on and on and on. And if you are driven by that, then you do the least possible. You're always unhappy. You're blaming others. And so you create agitation in yourself and you spread that to others. But if at any time in your life you look at what you have, then you'll find to your amazement that you have been blessed with millions of things. Unasked for, unknown, and in abundant supply. Why we don't see this is because our attention is on the things that we pay for. So you have value only for what you have paid for. You buy a new car, you have value for it because you've paid for it. But what about things that it's not charging. What about the things that you have got for free? For instance, you have an unbroken supply of oxygen. Just because it comes for free, does it mean that you should not be grateful for it? You are in good health, at least now. Does it not have any value? Your heart is pumping perfectly all through your life. No breakdowns if you don't do anything stupid. No annual maintenance contracts. Don't you think you have to be grateful for that? And so the list goes on endlessly. Now, whether you are in deficit mode or in abundance mode has nothing to do with what you have or don't have. Howard Hughes, one time richest man in the world, was in deficiency motivation. Sudama, on the other hand, you've all heard of Sudama? Sudama was a pauper. But he was always in a state of mental abundance. And so, one day when his wife sent him on a mission to Krishna, she said, "You say you are a friend of Krishna's?" So he said, "Yes, Krishna is a dear friend of mine." "Then why don't you go and ask him for help?" So he agrees to go, not because he wants anything, because he understands his wife has reached the limit of her tolerance. And the next morning, when he's about to leave on a mission to ask for help, he comes back and tells his wife, "I'm meeting my dear friend after so many years. How can I go empty-handed?" What a fine thought that is. Where, because you are aware of the abundance that you've been blessed with, and it has nothing to do with what you have, it's a mindset. You are always consumed with the attitude of giving. If you are not inspired by Sudama, you should go by a Harvard professor who's written a book called Give and Take, and who says, when you work in a spirit of giving, you actually create more profits. You create sense of well-being, not only for yourself, for your organization, for people around you. And you perform better. You contribute more. All you have to have is the attitude of giving. But we don't have that. All of us, irrespective of what we have, and you could have plenty, you're only going out into the world with an attitude of taking. And that makes beggars of us. Every morning we go out into the world begging for more. If you work with an attitude of giving, you become a master. Try it and see. So when you develop this, or when you're aware of the abundance that you've been blessed with, you develop an irresistible desire to give, to contribute, to add value to people, to serve. And that makes the mind calm. So once you have this attitude of giving, in what field must you contribute? You must identify your swadharma. Swadharma means your core interest, deeply embedded life interest. Every one of us is born with a gift, a talent, something unique that you bring to the world. One person is blessed with sporting abilities, another person with a wonderful voice, third person with business acumen, so on and so forth. You must identify your talent and work, invest your energies in the area of your talent. Only then will your mind be calm, you'll be happy, and you'll be successful. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, it's better to die in your swadharma. Swadharme nidhanam shreyaha, paradharmo bhayavaha. It's frightful to operate in a field that is alien to you. It's highly frustrating, and you will not be successful. Most of us choose vocations based on where you think. How can you make money in a field that you have no interest in? You can only make money in a field of your passion. Every day, if you're operating in your swadharma, every day you wake up excited that you have one more day to tap into your talent. Otherwise, you wake up going to work, pulling a long face. You look at the thousands of cars going to work, particularly on a Monday morning. Does anyone look excited? They're all pulling long faces. I often say, the bigger the car, the longer the face. Then, The important question is, what do you do with your talent? Most of us are tempted to just leverage it for profit and pleasure. So a sports person says, let me see how quickly I can make money before I fade out. A musician says the same thing. Every one of us is out to maximize profit. When you do that, Vedanta is not against making money. But Vedanta only says, where is your focus? So for instance, a musician, while singing, if his focus is not on what he's singing, if he's not completely immersed in the singing, and he's thinking only of the profit that will come as a result of that, it only leads to mediocrity. You must have the capacity to pursue excellence rather than profit. Because it's only when you pursue excellence that profit will follow you. If you pursue profit, you will neither get excellence nor profit. Slightly better than that is when you dedicate yourself to the field in which you are operating. For instance, Einstein did his work for the sheer love of science, not for profit. In fact, when he was first invited to the United States by an American university, and they asked him, what are your terms? He was completely confused. He had never thought of it before. And apparently he quoted such a low rate that the university unilaterally increased his remuneration, saying that you won't be able to make ends meet. Don Bradman played cricket for the sheer love of it. Mozart composed music for the love of it. Ustad Bismillah Khan played the Shehnai for the love of it. And that is what led them to excellence. So, if you pursue excellence, the world will amply reward you. You don't have to worry about that. The world is waiting for people with merit. And the highest action is when you understand the talent is not yours, it's a God-given gift. And every time you act, you offer that as your thanksgiving. That leads to perfection. Akbar was a Mughal king, and he was a lover of the arts. He had in his court a musician called Tansen. You've heard of him? And Akbar adored Tansen. But one day he asked him, said, I want to listen to your guru. So Tansen said, forget it, my guru won't come here. Akbar was a humble king. And he said, we'll go to where he is. And they went to a small village. There was a little temple there. And as they approached the temple, they heard the most exquisite music emerge from the temple. And there was Tansen's guru, Swami Haridas, singing, no audience. He was singing to the Lord. Akbar stood there mesmerized by this music. And when he went back to court, he asked Tansen, Tansen, you're brilliant. But your guru has a distinct edge over you. What's the difference? Tansen immediately said, very simple, Maharaj. I sing for you, he sings for the Lord. And that's it, friends. Whatever it is that you do, it could be sweeping a room, it could be cooking a meal, it could be, I don't know, whatever, the simplest of things. But if you do it with this dedication, by God, you'll attain perfection. Like in Chariots of Fire, the movie, the athlete says, God made me to run, and I will run for God. And by God, he won the Olympics. And so will you. But that thought of self keeps coming again and again and again. So how do you deal with that is the question. In another movie, when I keep referring to movies, please don't misunderstand. Don't think I do nothing but watch movies. In another movie by Robert Redford called The Legend of Bagger Vance, It's about a golfer in the 1930s. He's a brilliant golfer, very talented, but he comes up with some personal problem. He faces a personal problem and stops playing golf and takes to drink. Very easy. And then there is a tournament announced between the northern and southern states. In those days, there was bitter rivalry between them. And he was from Savannah. So his people went to him and said, if not for yourself, at least for the pride of Savannah, at least play for us. And there's a little boy who absolutely adores him. And he agrees to play, but it's easier said than done. He's been drinking so hard that he can barely see the ball. At that time, a man comes out of the wilderness, Will Smith. His name is Bagger Vance, and offers to be his caddy. And he says, I'll be your caddy for $5. So he tells Bagger Vance, do you know the caddy of the winner gets 10% of the prize money? He says, yes, I know, but you're playing so badly, I'll settle for 5. And that's the beginning of this wonderful relationship between Bagger Vance, the guru, and Ranulph Jr., the golfer. Bagger Vance, does it ring a bell? Bhagavan, correct. The golfer's name is Ranulph Jr. He's called Arjuna for short. Arjuna. See, you're laughing, but it's true. Robert Redford says, the movie is based on a book called Gita on the Green, written by another American. That reminds me of Swami Vivekananda. When he came to America to lecture, the Indian people were criticizing him. So why are you going there? Why don't you lecture to us? He said, the only way of getting Indians to study Vedanta is via the Americans. It's true. So anyway, the tournament begins. And at one spot, this guy is playing so badly that Bagger Vance calls him and says, there's a perfect shot waiting out there. All you've got to do is get yourself out of the way. It is so true. The whole of Vedanta, the whole of the Bhagavad Gita speaks of just that. Thought of self is the greatest obstacle standing between you and excellence. Just stop thinking of yourself and perfection, which is already in you, will flow. Think back to the moments, those magical moments when you came up with excellence. You will notice that these are the moments when somehow, maybe by fluke, chance, you stop thinking of yourself. And excellence came out of you. When you think back, you wonder, was that me? These are the moments experienced by a poet, a writer, or whoever. And when the thought of self comes, there's a block. You say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't think. Can't think because the thought of self comes. Look, take examples. A lady who cooks perfectly well, who's an excellent cook, when she has 5 guests over and she wants to impress them, she burns one dish, she puts excess salt in the other, and the whole meal is spoiled. Why? Not because she does not know how to cook, but the thought of self came in. But when she's cooking for her family, her mind is calm, she's not thinking of herself, she comes up with brilliance. A lady who's otherwise a chatterbox, it's difficult to get her to stop talking. Put her before an audience and give her a mic, she starts stammering. Why? The thought comes, what will they think of me? And so is it with all of us. So, there are 3 types of actions: selfish, unselfish, selfless. Selfish actions, I don't need to explain, we're all experts at it. Where the overriding concern is, what's in it for me? You're obsessed with the I factor. Unselfish is where you set aside your selfish interests and focus on the benefit of others. Loka Sangraha, says the Gita. Loka Sangraha, the welfare of humanity. It could be your extended family, it could be the community, it could be the organization you work for, it could be anything, going right up to all beings. Why is he telling us to become unselfish? Is because success equals competence multiplied by hard work, multiplied by IQ, multiplied by education, so on and so forth, divided by self-centeredness. So you find people who are brilliant, but who don't excel because they are too selfish. In order to excel, you don't need to have a high IQ. You don't need to be brilliant. You don't need to be PhDs. All you need is ordinary people with extraordinary motivation. And that extraordinary motivation comes when you are not selfish. And the third category of action is selfless, where you are neither interested in yourself, nor are you really concerned about the world, because you know two things: that the world will get taken care of. Number two, you cannot add value to the world. But you are deeply interested in the transcendental. You have an intense desire for enlightenment, for self-realization. These are the people who have guided humanity. There was a Buddha, there was a Christ, there was a Krishna, there was Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Ramana Maharshi. When Ramakrishna was sent to school by his elder brother, he came back saying, "What are they teaching me? They're teaching me about the world. I don't want to know the world. I want to know God." And he opted out, dropped out of school. And he was illiterate, but he got to God. I'm not suggesting you should be illiterate. What I'm saying is that intensity of desire. It's called mumukshatva, the desire for freedom, and understanding that you're a slave of your senses. You are in a prison of your own making, and that desire to break free. So, you must fix a higher ideal. Higher ideal is referred to as yajna in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. Yajna is an age-old Vedic ritual, which is fire worship, which was given a contemporary meaning by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Because when he tells Arjuna to perform yajna, he's not asking him to start another fire. There are enough fires anyway. He's asking him to work in a spirit of service and sacrifice. And why is it? Because he says, when the Creator created the human being, he created the human being sahayajna, means with the capacity to sacrifice, which is denied to all other creatures. No dog can say after you. No peacock can sacrifice. Only the human being has this wonderful ability. And then he says, with this, may you prosper. You know what it means? Without it, it is impossible to prosper. And all of us are trying to prosper without the capacity, without this attitude of service. Therefore, we succeed like chicken flying. Have you seen a chicken fly? It flaps its wings, makes a lot of noise, goes up, and before you know it, it's come down. So you excel. What these are? Before you know it, you're down. I met a guy in California last year, and I met him again this year. He introduced himself to me as an ex-millionaire. He says, I made millions. But then before I knew it, the millions disappeared. That's what they... But if you work in a spirit of sacrifice, you reach long-term success. And then he says, may this be the kamadhenu of all your endeavors. Kamadhenu is a mythological cow residing in heaven. And if you go to Kamadhenu, she will fulfill all your desires. Tathastu, she says, everything fulfilled. Now don't ask me for Kamadhenu's address. Sacrifice is Kamadhenu. When you work in a spirit of sacrifice, your desires automatically get fulfilled. And so how does it work? When you fix a higher ideal, it unlocks your potential, it releases a great deal of energy and gives you peace of mind. I was brought up in India in an atmosphere of shortages. There was rice was rationed, wheat was rationed, sugar was rationed, milk was rationed. Almost everything was in short supply except human beings. And at that time, a brilliant man appeared on the scene. Brilliant because instead of thinking of how do I scramble up the corporate ladder or whichever ladder people are scrambling up, he thought of how can I use my expertise to help the situation out there. And he came up with a creative idea. That creative idea was cooperative dairy farming. One idea of one man helped change the face of India from a country of milk shortage to the largest producer of milk in the world. This is the power of the spirit of giving. And he got all kinds of awards. He became world famous. I'm sure you've heard of him, Dr. Verghese Kurian. What stops us from just thinking of giving? You don't need to give anything. You can't give. We are all in a hopeless state of bankruptcy, spiritually. What can you give? But think of giving. And the thought of giving transforms you into a towering personality. But nobody is inspired to do that because the fear is, what will happen to me if I give? Huh? Physics corroborates this. These roses are red. What makes it red? Some of you are wearing red. When white light, which consists of 7 colors, falls on that red object, it absorbs all other colors except red. So we all know that red is the only color it does not have. Right? Yet you say, it is red. Has it ever occurred to you, how is it that the 6 colors it grabs, it loses? The one color it gives, it gains. And so is it in life, friends. We conduct these courses for children, school kids, above 8. And we tell them, give, you gain, grab, you lose. So they get very excited. One kid went home and came back the next day and said, it works. So I said, what works? When you give, you gain. So I was curious to know what she was talking about. She said, I went home and there was only one chocolate at home. And normally I would have fought with my younger sister for it. But because I heard this, I thought, let's experiment with it. And she said, I told my sister, I don't want it. You can have it. And she had a beaming face. So I said, then what happened? She said, she gave it back to me. This is it, friends. So, take a look at your action. Where does it spring from? Do you perform? Do you just go through the routine of your job? Then you find life boring. Or are you inspired to work emotionally? You know, there was a guy here in the United States whose child was born horribly handicapped. But he and his wife decided that they would give him as normal a life as possible. He couldn't speak, he couldn't pretty much do most things. But they devised a laptop through which this kid could communicate and sent him to school to learn whatever little he could. And one day when the other kids were running, he typed on his laptop, "I wish I could run." And that sentence changed the father. That man, the father, who was not athletic, who had never run in his life, now started running with a kid on his back. Because he wanted the child to experience what it is to run. He couldn't run, he couldn't even walk, the child. And he started winning races. He won the Boston Marathon, he won triathlons, he won all kinds of races. And quite a few years later, when he got a mild heart attack, the cardiologist told him, if you hadn't been running all these years, you would have died 20 years back. So this is it. When you give, you gain. But that emotional motivation is necessary. Do you have an emotional motivation to work, is the question. Are you doing it for someone? You know, when Sachin Tendulkar, you are familiar with him? Cricketer, was playing in the World Cup in England in 1999. His father died in Bombay. So he had to fly back and perform his duties as a son. But he chose almost immediately to go back and rejoin his team. And the first match he played was a brilliant 140 runs that he scored. Mind you, he was tired, he was jet-lagged, he was grief-stricken, he was in no mood to play, yet he played, and I'm not imagining it. He said, "I dedicate this innings to my father." So somehow when you are emotionally motivated, you set aside the limitations of the body and come out with brilliant performance. Move up to the intellect. When you have an intellectual conviction, like the Wright brothers had, which was they thought it was possible to fly across the Atlantic. Apparently, I don't know, they had a lot of obstacles before them because they weren't even engineers, they had a fund crunch, but they rose above all that and they were the first to fly across the Atlantic because they had this conviction. Do you have a conviction? It could be to discover a cure for cancer. It could be, you know, I was in Poughkeepsie the other day and I came to know a fascinating story of an Indian doctor, a lady doctor in the 1920s. She was married very young, as girls were at that time, and she had a son who died at 10 months of age. And when her son died, she decided that she would become a doctor to save other children from dying. And she came here to Poughkeepsie to train. And apparently, she was ill-prepared for the cold. She used to wear 9-yard saris. And unfortunately, she contracted TB. But she became a doctor. And when she went back, she was fired with this ideal to help other kids. Unfortunately, she died young. And her ashes were sent back here because she had made friends with a family called Carpenter, I think. And her ashes are buried. Even today, if anyone can go and visit her tombstone. Amazing story of intellectual conviction of one lady. You go a step further to the subtle intellect or conscience. You follow your conscience and you can take the world by storm. Mahatma Gandhi was motivated by his conscience. He often told the British, he says, "I don't hate you, I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting for truth and justice." And it is this that made him win. against the greatest of odds. There are people who are working for the environment. There are people who are working for animal welfare. I met a gentleman in San Francisco who's working for veganism. They are all motivated by their conscience. So the question is, whatever it is that you're doing, do you ever ask yourself, is it right for me to do this? Does my conscience approve of it? Often, because of the pressure of desire, we set aside the conscience and do things which we ourselves don't think is right. And that is the problem. So, spirit of service. When you work with a spirit of service, nature conspires to serve you back. And you get back much more than you ever imagined in your life. When Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi came back from England with a law degree, he had the choice of pursuing a law career or working for the nation. And when he took that momentous decision to work for the nation, he did not in his wildest dreams think that he would be anointed a Mahatma, that he would take the world by storm, that every currency note in India, even till today, would carry his picture. He had no idea. But it happened. And so will it happen to anyone who works in a spirit of service. Wordsworth says in his poem Daffodils, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So he didn't even know the golden daffodils existed. They suddenly came upon him. This is serendipity. Sudden, unexpected moments of immense joy. This will come to you only if you work in a spirit of service. Take a look at the world. The sun gives valuable light and heat. Have you heard of anyone getting a bill directly from the sun? Nor does the sun have this desire to benefit humanity. It gives heat and light because it must. That's its nature. Flowers give fragrance because it must. There is no flower that copyrights or patents its fragrance. We are shameless enough to extract the fragrance and copyright it, patent it. Rivers give water. Clouds give rain. No element in nature works with a selfish purpose except the human being. And therefore, no element in nature suffers from stress except the human being. The fact that Prozac, an antidepressant, is the largest selling drug in the United States is a sad reflection on society. And very soon it will be the largest selling in India because we follow whatever you people do. Next is oneness. How do you look at others? Every day you emerge from your home strongly entrenched in the feeling of separateness, that you are different from me. And we find security in imposing uniformity. So if you look like me, if you have the same color of skin as me, if you speak the same language as me, I'm comfortable. But I'm positively uncomfortable with a person who is different from me. But yet, diversity is the very nature of the world. No two flowers are alike, no two parrots are alike. Similarly, no two human beings are alike. But you have to have the capacity to rise above the differences and see the oneness that pervades. The Vedas call it the difference between Laghu Chetasam, small-minded people, who say this is mine and that is yours, and Udara Charitanam, large-hearted people, who say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole universe is one family. If you feel separate from the whole world, you are condemning yourself to utter loneliness. And they say loneliness is far more devastating than alcoholism or chain smoking. We are all isolated. You start communicating with people. You feel one with the family. You extend that. Feel one with the community. Feel one with the nation, and your happiness increases. There are elderly people in India who live modest lives, ordinary middle class lifestyles. And their son is in the United States doing very well for himself. So they sit there, the father sits there gloating over the son's success. How does he find it in him to celebrate the son's success? Because he feels one with the son. But if the neighbor's son is doing well, he's positively unhappy. If you feel one, you have the ability to enjoy the success of others as if it were yours. And that's a wonderful capacity we have. So I often tell Americans, we Indians have a distinct advantage over you. Because if you feel one with the country, your happiness increases 300 million times. If we feel one with the country, immediately 1.2 billion times. But it's true. If you learn the art of enjoying the opponent's success as if it were yours, you will never meet with failure in life. And the last is communion. When you understand there is a divine power that's functioning everywhere in the world, and that divine power is the same in you, in me, in a criminal, in a goat, in a bird, you celebrate that oneness. You have to accustom yourself to that oneness, communion. Then you don't feel insecure. You don't feel threatened. You know, there was an old lady who lived by herself, and she had no one to speak to. So every morning she would open her door and say, "Praise the Lord." She had a neighbor who was an atheist, and every time she said, "Praise the Lord," that guy would get irritated. So one day he decided to teach her a lesson. So she opened the door and said, "I don't have enough money to buy the groceries for the following week." So she was discussing with God. He heard it. So he went and bought a huge bag of groceries, exactly what she wanted, and placed it before her door. So when she opened the door the next morning, she assumed that bag of groceries was given by God because she hadn't told anyone else about it. And she started thanking God profusely for the groceries. When the neighbor opened his door and said, "You stupid woman, God didn't give you the groceries, I bought them and placed them there." But she went on unfazed. She said, "Thank you, God. Not only did you provide me the groceries, but you made the devil pay for them." So that a person who feels this communion never feels insecure. And we live in an age where we secure everything. The car has a lock, the home has a lock. Very soon we will have locks. Knowledge. The ability to know that everything in the world is transitory, passing, ephemeral. And you say, "I don't want to have anything to do with that which passes. I want something permanent." The very search for the permanent is so exhilarating. Never mind whether you get it or not. Because the moment you understand that the world and all that it has to offer, including the best, is temporary, you don't settle for it. I'll tell you a story. In our scriptures, they talk about it. Apparently in a state, they had a strange custom. They would appoint a king once in 5 years. That's not so strange. We appoint prime ministers and presidents every 5 years. But at the end of 5 years, this king would be ferried across the river and left in the jungle there to be consumed by wild animals. So king after king would come. The first year he would enjoy his kingship. Second year Once in a way, he would think of what would happen after 5 years. Third year, uncomfortable. Fourth year, stressed out. Fifth year, he couldn't sleep. And he got himself into such a state that on the final day, invariably, that king had to be lifted and put into the ferry and sent. Suddenly, one young man appeared on the scene who offered to be king. And every succeeding year, his celebration and enjoyment, instead of reducing, would increase. And in the last year, he had a whale of a time. Last day, he threw a magnificent banquet for all his people and waved goodbye and got into the boat. So his people weren't sure whether this guy was mad or what's wrong with him. He got into the boat and looked at the old boatman and asked him, how much do you get paid for ferrying a king once in 5 years across the river? That was his only job. He said, $5,000 a month. So the king said, will you work for me if I double your salary? And the boatman thought he was offering him a job in heaven. But by that time, they had reached the other shore. And to his amazement, he saw not the jungle, but a completely new state that was created there by this king. So what he had done was, every day that he was king in the earlier state, where he was temporary king, he was systematically transferring his assets to the other shore, where he would be permanent king. So that's how you should live life, friends. Enjoy the world. In the 11th chapter of the Gita, Krishna unabashedly tells Arjuna and all of us, therefore, enjoy this vast kingdom. Every one of us has a kingdom. Enjoy it thoroughly, fully. But don't forget to transfer your assets and create a permanent kingship for yourself. And that transference of the assets is 1 hour of investment in the study of the scriptures. Just 1 hour. Start with 30 minutes. And that's why we have some of our CDs on the table outside. Take a look at it on your way out. Pick up something. Why I'm asking you to do this is because knowledge is the only thing that helped me when I was young and looking for solutions. No one can help you. Nobody could help me. Not my parents, not my family, not the school that I went to, and certainly not the government. No one can help you because nobody knows. The only thing that helps is this knowledge. And I would pick up a book on Vedanta and not just read. I would take one idea and say, understand it for what it is. Then look at myself and say, this is what it's talking about. This is where I am. How can I bring myself up to that understanding, to that living? It's only then that the knowledge speaks to you. Otherwise, you become a professor of philosophy. There's a huge difference between a professor and a Vedantic. Professor of philosophy usually pulls a long face because he's got too much knowledge that weighs him down. And he's not living it. The test of spiritual development is cheer, dynamism, exuberance. Like Krishna, from his birth onwards, right till the end, he was full of cheer, joy, mischief, infectious joy. Mischief is a combination of cheer and intelligence. So if your kids are mischievous, don't blame them. Appreciate them. So, this knowledge, when assimilated, you become cheerful. And all this happens when you're aware of the fact that everything is transient. Next comes ego. What is ego? Ego is like a bubble on the surface of the ocean. What is a bubble? A thin film of water that has encapsulated a little bit of air. And the bubble, once it forms a bubble, then it creates an individuality separate from the totality. And then it must feed itself. So the bubble wants to get bigger and bigger and bigger until at one time, what happens? The bubble bursts. When the bubble is in existence, what is it? It's just water and air. And when the bubble bursts, the water goes back to the totality, air goes back to the totality. There is no difference. The only thing is that little bit of hawa, air. So ego is nothing but air. How do you reduce that ego? Acknowledge the role of others in your success. However brilliant you may think you are, however hard you may have worked, you cannot deny the fact that hundreds and thousands of people have contributed to the fact that you are successful today. You are successful because you have power. Somebody came up with computers. Somebody created that. Someone taught you right from primary school up to university. So on and so forth. How can you arrogate the success to yourself and completely obliterate the contribution of others? Second, most important, acknowledge the role of some divine power in your success. What if halfway through your life you went blind, for instance, like John Milton went blind? At least then you can do something. What if you had a coma? I know a guy in Nagpur who's been in a coma for the last 12 years. A brilliant businessman, extraordinarily successful businessman. That it hasn't happened to you, you owe it to someone. Therefore, in the Indian culture, whenever you bought something new, whenever you started something new, whenever you came up with a new endeavor, it always began with a puja, a prayer. Now today, we might perform that puja, but it's not with the spirit of acknowledging the divine. You may or may not do the puja, but if from the depth of your being you are acutely aware of the contribution of others, you can never get egoistic. Like Emerson said, every man I meet is in some way my superior. What a fabulous thought to carry with you all your life. The last and most important thought I want to leave you with is the definition of happiness. All of us are seeking happiness. We are in the relentless pursuit of happiness. Nobody knows where it is or how to gain it. Vedanta, the Vedas, Upanishads give a definition of happiness, which is extraordinary. The definition is, it's a formula for happiness. Number of desires fulfilled divided by number of desires you entertain or harbor. Now, if you go along with this formula, if you want to increase your happiness, what must you do? Sorry? Decrease the denominator or increase the numerator. Where is our focus? What are we all doing? We are looking at the numerator. Our focus is on the numerator. And we have succeeded in fulfilling desires, right? But has your happiness increased proportionately? No. Why? Because without your realizing it, insidiously, while you are fulfilling the desires, while you are increasing the numerator, the denominator also increases and completely nullifies the increase in the numerator. So even mathematically, the numerator is irrelevant. It doesn't matter how low the numerator is. What really matters is the denominator. If you systematically bring down the denominator, your happiness increases in leaps and bounds. And if that denominator comes down to zero, what happens? Infinite happiness. That's what you're seeking. But when we speak of bringing down desires, you're not inspired by that because you equate it to object of desire. That's not what we're saying. In fact, what Vedanta says is, desire is the greatest obstacle to your obtaining object of desire. So, rise above desire, the object of desire will come to you. Unsought, unsolicited. If you don't believe me, try it. When you have an intense desire for something, the more you run after a desire, the object will elude you. Turn your back on desire, object of desire comes to you. You know, in Mumbai, India, I live opposite a college. So you have university students there. And one day, a young man came to me and said, I need to talk to you. I have a problem. So I said, sure, come. And then I asked him what his problem was. He said, very sheepishly, I've fallen in love. So I said, but that's not a problem. He said, no, you don't understand. She doesn't love me. So I said, how do you know that? He said, I call her out to wherever young people go, and she gives some excuse. So I said, stop calling her. Then he pounced on me and said, but I lose her. I said, my friend, you haven't even gained her. How can you lose her? So he followed my advice, not because he had faith in me, but because he was desperate. 5 days later, he calls and says, guess what? She called. If any of you have a similar problem, follow this advice. But it's true. Look back into your life, and you'll find whenever you were obsessed with a thing, it never came to you. And when you got fed up and dropped it, it came to you. Why it is so, I don't know. But that it is so, I know, I'm convinced. Now the question arises, how do you rise above desire? Pick a higher desire. What is this higher desire? All of us are body worship. Pick up an emotional desire, and the physical desire will no longer bother you. Like for instance, suppose I were to say that I brought the most delicious sweet from India to distribute to all of you after this session. Not true, just an example. Because I've been in this country already for 3 weeks. And you say, oh, I love it. And I haven't had it for a very long time. But when I give it to you, you don't eat it. And I say, I thought you said you liked it. Why aren't you eating it? You say, I'm taking it home for my child. You go home and give it to your child. The child eats all of it without offering you a bite. Do you feel denied? No. Why? Because the emotional desire of seeing your child enjoy it is so great that the physical desire of wanting to eat it completely vanishes, at least for the time. You go a step further to the intellect. I know a youngster right now in Mumbai who's struggling. Otherwise, he used to waste his time. His mother had to get after him, do your homework, prepare for exams, so on and so forth. Now, he's self-driven. So when his friends call him out, he says no. When the family says, come out to dinner with us, he says no. Because he's working very hard for admission to a good university in the United States. So when you have an intellectual ideal, both emotional and physical desires fade away. And the last jump, pick up a spiritual ideal. All desires vanish, but the world comes to you. You attract the world by your sheer power and merit. So, Bharata means to revel in the light of Atman, which is the spirit in you. Go back to your roots. And as human beings, I started by saying you're born ordinary, but you're not designed to die ordinary. You're designed to become extraordinary and get into the realm of the infinite, the spiritual. So, harbor that thought. The thought that you're not just an ordinary person, you're an outstanding person. And then maybe you'll get there. So, friends, these few ideas that I've presented to you is not all that Vedanta has to offer. I've just given you a smattering. It's like a promo of a movie. But the purpose of this is so that you may be motivated and inspired to get into the rest of Vedanta, so that it can take you, guide you to that state of perfection. If not perfection, if you can't conceive of perfection, at least becoming a better person, attaining extraordinary success, being a happy person. And my appeal to you is, please go home with this suspicion that maybe, like Bhagavans told Ranulph Jr., the golfer, there's a perfect shot waiting out there. All you have to do is get yourself out of the way. As we run a trust not-for-profit trust in India, which is dedicated to spreading the knowledge of Vedanta. And we have devised special courses for school kids, for university students, because by the time we come to 2050, half of India's population is going to be under age 25. That's a huge demographic dividend, provided they have a sense of direction and they know what they're doing. But if they just grow wild, that dividend will become a horrible nightmare. And so we have not only devised it and we run it in schools and universities in English, but we have translated it into Hindi, Marathi, and shortly we'll do it in Gujarati. And we're taking it out to tribal kids, rural kids, and to the slum children in Mumbai, which is a huge population. We've only started 1 or 2 years back, and we've got a few trained teachers who are going out, and this program continues even while I travel. But if you feel inspired to help us, then you can give a donation to a Human Service Foundation. Here, you'll get tax exemption, and they will transfer the funds to us. Thank you very much for a patient listening. And we have a website, and we have our videos on YouTube. So even though we are 10,000 miles away, I'm in Mumbai and you are here, we can remain connected. Do browse through the CDs on your way out. We have the entire Bhagavad Gita in MP3 and DVD format. So you can take it and listen to it, if not individually, with a group of your friends. Thank you.